Well, welcome back to the Fulton line. We're going to continue with our elevator build, and today we're going to build the legs portion of it. I had previously recorded the building of the head, but I had editing issues. I now have Windows 10, a new Amazon tablet, and it's an MP4 format. It's complicated. I'm having problems editing it. So anyways, I made another head just to demonstrate how this was constructed. This is the one I'm going to use. Basically, I glued the sides together, kind of came up with some spare raw ties, and that's what kind of gave it its thickness, as you can see there. Then it took a thin sheet and just glued it around, all the way around the edges, and there's a relief in here so that it looks like these plates would come off, so everything is bolted together across through here so you can service this thing. And there'll be additional detail. There's a motor here because there's a big pulley. This has a belt, like I said earlier, with buckets screwed to it, and there'll be a motor on the side, conduits and things like that, conduits that run up the side. There'll probably be a light or something at the top. The motor will be on this side. That's why we have the catwalk, is so they can climb up, unclog any kind of clogs that they may have in this section here where it goes down the chutes, and also to stand and service the motor if they have to. There's a bearing on this side, they can grease that, so forth. So, when you build stuff like this, you have to kind of think realistically in how they would gain access to the top, how it would be maintained. And that's, to me, that's part of modeling, is the fact that this piece has a function. So when we model it, we need to make sure that the model is close to the way it actually functions in real life. So so that's the whole premise with that. So let's get on with making the legs. Basically, if we look back at the prototype, I stuck with this 2 ties glued together, and these were leftover materials from when I was building turnouts. As you can see, I don't throw anything away. Little bits and pieces of everything is what you need to keep all of that, so because you can use it in the future, even if it's just to stack up. A lumber yard, you could use those in a lumber yard or something. But basically, these two glued together is the distance between the legs, and so we're gonna tape these down kind of in this fashion with the spacers in it, and then we're going to glue the sides, because this angle actually is what's holding these two pieces together. And this is simulating, I believe, 10-foot sections, and I believe it's 10-foot sections. Let me look here. Actually, it looks like, yeah, 10-foot sections. Okay, so think of these as 10-foot sections with flanges on each end, and then this is butted up to that, and they're bolted together, and that's the way they build these things. You can go on YouTube, and there's a lot of videos on that manufacturers put out about their products and how they operate, and there's some animation and stuff, and it kind of give you an idea how this works. But the big thing is you can look at the detail up close and see what the bearing flange looks like, the motor, the catwalks, the way this thing is put together, and what happens inside of it as well. So enough of that. So we're gonna start by First off, I'm going to tape this down and tape it together. That way it won't come apart. I have some tape over here. Make sure the ends are even. And I don't want to tape this down. I actually want to tape it together. Look at something here. Okay, that's not quite even. And really I should be measuring this to make sure that the tape is not in a spot where it's going to interfere with that. So let's see here. That's 10 and 20, so that's in a good spot there. Yeah, I should have cut some longer tape, huh? Okay, and that's not even on the ends at all. Okay, sorry about that. I got some tape and made some better pieces, but it's the basic same thing. There's the spacer is inside, so I'm just got some longer tape so it would wrap all the way around. I measured to make sure that I was out of the way of the stringers that go back and forth, so or cross it. So all right, so there we go. We've got this, and it's got a nice space to it. I do have, yes, a third section of this that I'll put in there just to let it float, because one of these is straight, the other one has like a bow to it. So we'll try and make sure that that is straight before we glue anything down, or the spacing is correct. And I mean, you can bend it, you know, so that's why we have the straight edges, so we can pull it against it and, you know, tape it down if we have to straight and glue it together. And the spacers are there so that everything is parallel. So hopefully that makes sense to you. And also, one of these is this one is a little longer than the other one. This one is longer than this one. So this end is actually parallel with one another, so we have a nice right angle. So we'll work from this end back this way, and once we get it glued up, we'll trim this off and make it even before we put the base on and all that good stuff. So the next thing to do is, of course, I have my HO scale on the ruler here, and I'm going to work from the side. I'm going to line it up at the 0 mark here, and I'm going to mark these at 10-foot increments. Now this thing is actually 70 scale feet tall. Well, these are actually, the raw pieces are actually about 72.5 feet. I can't remember if I cut them off or not. I don't think I did. And no, I didn't. So we'll leave that. But you know, this at this facility, this could have been put in first, and then several years later they purchased another unit, so it could be a little shorter, just to give you some variety of variation, a variation there, rather than everything looking cookie cutter, I guess. That's something to take into consideration when you're doing a scratch build. I know that part of this facility has a where this silos and elevators are. Part of that is the factory, and then the other half, which is larger, is actually the warehouse. And those are going to be contrasting buildings. So this particular factory end will be brick, like a maybe manufactured or constructed in the mid-70s, and then the warehouse was built later or expanded, at least the part that we'll see, and it's actually corrugated siding. Not sure what kind of roof this building will have, but whether it's gravel or a membrane. I know the warehouse is going to have a white membrane roof on it, so we'll get to all that later. So let's continue on with this. Now, these stringers on our prototype are actually an angle. It's 3/32, I believe, and that's the smallest I could get. Now, to me, it's a little large, because this would probably wind up being in HO scale probably a 3x3. Yeah, 3x3 angle, which really this unit probably only has 1.5 to 2 inch, but it is what it is. So we'll move on. All right, so I'm gonna stop the camera real quick. I'm gonna take these scribe marks at the 10-foot increments, and I'm basically just gonna go all the way around so that when we glue this on, we have something to line everything up with. And I'll probably glue some of those on off camera, and then show you how I do them when we come back. Marked. I don't know if this will show up on camera or not, but I went and scribed a line all the way around. I added a middle support just because it was easier to go ahead and do that. So, and I've also cut the stringers, the pieces of angle that run all the way around, and we're going to glue those on. I've got some CA glue here, and we'll just go ahead and do one real quick. All right, and also the uneven part is actually going to be the top, which is this is the top. We want to make sure that our angle is pointed up, so we're going to glue that on there like that. And I can see my scribe line. I want to make sure that's square. It's right at 90-degree angles. The angle is 90 degrees with the sides of the legs. And I do some overhang too, because if you'll notice, the sides here are even with the long pieces, are even with these edges here. front edge and the back edge, or the back edge and the front edge. And then the end angles actually overhang here. So you see how that's done. So I want to make sure, and it's easier to make them longer and trim that off. Then the ends are actually going to be longer too. And I may not have cut these long enough. That's going to be questionable. Oh well. Okay. Now, it's easier to go ahead and glue everything on one side and let it glue, because when you roll it over to do the other side, it's actually going to be resting on this angle. And before, when I did these on the prototype, I didn't let them glue. I didn't let the glue dry, and they rolled. So some of them I had to peel back off and redo. So okay, let's continue on. We'll glue some more on. And it's just easier to do it this way, is to stab it and lay it on there. Again, make sure it's straight. This is glue that I'm using, just regular old testers. And it actually dries fairly quickly, so. One of the things I should have done is these legs, the leg material is actually not quite square. What I mean by that is the edges are higher than the middle, so it kind of has a bow to it. So not very much, but it's there. And I'm just putting the glue right over the mark, and because you really need to look at each one of these individually as you're putting them on. And basically I'm looking at the ends, the line on the end, but the big thing is I want it to be, like I said, 90-degree angle with the side, because these were built in a shop, in a fab welding shop, and those guys are craftsmen, and they want to make sure their product is square. And besides, you're stacking all this stuff on top of one another, and obviously the actual housing, this square box, if you will, once they bolt them together, you want the elevator to be straight, you know, vertical or plumb. So when they make that thing together, if they're off a little bit, you know, it's not gonna be straight up and down, plumb. if I'm off a little bit, high or low, I'm not really concerned about that. Hopefully no one's going to get a ruler out. To me, a difference in distance between these, and I mean they're really close, is less noticeable than this piece being not square with everything. So just my personal opinion. So yeah, this will be the bottom. It's square, and the top is uneven a little bit. So when we glue that on there, it's kind of going. That's about square right there, so you can kind of see the difference, that little gap. So we'll fix that once we get this structure put together and it's a little stronger. So I mean, this thing will, you know, there's a little bit of flex, but you'd be surprised when you get all this. I mean, this is actually part of the structure. I mean, this model, for this model, these pieces are part of the structure. So at the top up here, I've got some flat that I'll just kind of go around the top. You can see that in there, that piece right there. Just kind of finishes it off and hides the top. So, all right. Okay, that looks like that's dried a little bit. So we'll carry on and do a little more on the back side here. Get some glue going here. Just a pencil with a pen stuck in it. Get a little glob of glue on there. And it's a lot easier picking these little bitty parts up by poking it with the blade. Now here what we're doing is we've got several directions. We want to make sure it's even this way. It's not too low compared to the other side. This is the glued side. This is the current piece we're gluing on. And we want to make sure it's at 90 degrees as well. And they're the same height from side to side, because we're going to put this piece on and we don't want it, we want it 90 degrees as well. And the lines that I scribed are not perfect, so it happens. And again, we're going to shave all of this off so that this piece of angle will be flush with this surface, and then the side piece will go from edge to edge, and they will overhang, and we will cut those individually as we go, and that's very tedious because you want it to look like this, nice crisp corners. You know, the more detail you try and get with this, the better end product you're going to have. That's with anything that you do. So and I'll put this one on, and I'll go away and put the rest of them on and come back. All right, I'll put the rest of them on. But again, I appreciate you stopping by the Fulton line. If you can, somewhere on the screen there is a subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up, and all your comments are welcome as usual, either criticisms or just encouragement, whichever. I'll respond to either one.